righty. We are locked and loaded, ready to go. We've got a couple people here in class today, so I'll make sure to talk to them. We're also trying to go live on Instagram, but let me know you're here. Drop me a comment if you are joining us from Facebook. I should be able to see if you're joining from the Resilient Realtor Facebook page or even from the forum. I should be able to see your comments, but let me know that you're here. I can see there's 4 of you guys that have joined us today, but these classes are so much better when there's interaction. And so this one specifically is going to be a great class because we're going to be talking all about, let me make sure I've got my mouse up. We're going to be talking all about personality profiles and specifically unlocking personality profiles. And this may be something you're keenly aware of. It may be something you're like, what the heck is a personality profile? And why is it important to my business? So during today's class, we're going to be specifically talking about how to identify different types of people and how we can adjust to work with them. So quick intro, my name's Christy Jenks. I'm a mom here in the Phoenix metro area. I've got a lot of big personalities in my family that I deal with, and also my team here is the Big Helper team here in the Phoenix metro area. One of the reasons I teach these classes is because I love giving back to the real estate community, and I'm always looking to partner with agents that want to grow their business. So if you want to learn more about our team, you can absolutely check it out at bighelpergroup.com and learn more about the team. The resources for today, mainly you're going to use the slides. I have one handout that you can get at the bighelpertraining.com. You'll be able to get that resource. But for most of what we're doing, we're going to be focusing on the slides. And I definitely want your guys' questions. Conrad's in the house, Meryl's in the house. I've got 2 other users. It didn't tell me your names. It just says Facebook user. But I appreciate you guys being here. So let's jump into what the heck is a personality profile and why does it matter? I'll make myself a little bit smaller and we'll make the screen a little bit bigger. So I love this quote out of the book. It's a really, really good one. He says, people will not buy from you. They will not be influenced by you. And they might not even collaborate with you if they aren't comfortable with the way that you come across personally and professionally. So I want you to think, has there ever been a time where you met somebody that you were like, yeah, I'm not doing business with that person, right? Like, or you just didn't feel comfortable, and contrary to that, you probably have also met somebody that you were like, yeah, what do you need? I'll sign everything over to you. I completely trust you and I'm ready to do business with you. That comes down to communication styles and personality preferences. So the book that I'm actually going to be referencing mainly today is this book. It's called The Social Styles Handbook. So you can get this on Amazon. This one is my favorite one. I've actually read a couple different ones. There's another one on my reading list, and you can tell like mine is very well used, highlighted, Post-it notes, stars, circles. I go back to it again and again as I'm really trying to learn more about the best way to communicate with people. That's why this matters, right? For those of you guys that are real estate agents, I think most of us are real estate agents that have joined today in the training, does it matter how we communicate with people? Absolutely. It can be the difference between, and when we think about how people come to work with us, it could mean the difference of them choosing to work with you or choosing to work with one of the other 40,000 plus agents here in the Phoenix metro area, right? Like, competition is fierce. Have you ever said, like, everybody knows a realtor, right? Everybody knows a real estate agent. So how do we get them to choose to work with us? That's why this matters. That's why I've chosen this as a topic. So let's start to talk about some of the different personality profiles and how you can identify them. So let's go back to our screen share. And here we go. So first thing I want you guys to be thinking about is what to look for when you're trying to figure out who they are. Okay, so I'm going to give you some key things, and then we're going to break into the different personality profiles, and I'm even going to give you some examples. So some of the things that you want to look for is when they're talking. What do they talk about? How do they talk? Do they talk fast? Do they talk slow? What's their tone of speech? Are they very steady? Are they soft-spoken? Right? Are they magnanimous and just, do they have a lot of gestures, and are they big in their personality, or are they reserved, deliberate, concise? Okay. Body language is a huge one across the personality profiles. The communication style, how they prefer to communicate, their responsiveness, the listening pattern. It even comes down to what they wear, guys. Certain personality profiles have different types of colors that they have an affinity towards and will wear more often than other. So when you're trying to decide what type of personality profile the person across the table from you on the other side of the phone or even via email, you're looking for all the cues. You're going to be a detective, right? And like with anything right now, if you're first learning this, it's going to be a little bit harder, but the more you do it and the more you try to pinpoint personality profiles, the easier it gets. And as soon as you can identify what their main personality and secondary personality trait is, you unlock an opportunity to communicate with them in a style and a pattern that they're going to be comfortable with. And that's where change, persuasion, and influence happens, right? And we all want to influence the people that we work with. Most of the time, the influence is, I just want to help them get the best outcome. But if they don't trust me, right, and they're going to fight me along the whole way, it's going to be a difficult transaction. Or has there ever been a time that you've miscommunicated something? Oh my gosh, that happened actually. I'm not going to do the example because it's too close to home, but just yesterday I had a very good case study for miscommunication between two personality profiles, two people that know, like, and trust each other. Total miscommunication could have blown up the relationship. Luckily, both people were humble enough and open enough to talk through it. But that's why this stuff matters, is you don't want to be caught in a miscommunication because you didn't read that person or didn't have the respect for the person to try to be versatile in understanding who they are and how they like to communicate. So let's talk about the different personality profiles. So I'm going to be, for today's class, I'm going to be talking about the DISC assessment, okay? Tony Robbins has a fantastic DISC assessment, and Kelsey will post in the Resilient Realtor. We've got a version of a free DISC assessment because Tony Robbins you have to pay now. We've used stuff like Crystal Knows as well, but the one that we'll post in the Resilient Realtor, this is a free version. It's the DISC assessment, DISC. So that's kind of, there's Enneagram, there's, all sorts of different ones. This one is just a really simplified version of the Enneagram and stuff like that. So I'm going to be referring to as the DISC assessment. So the one personality profile is what we call the D, or the driver, right? Another one is the I, or we like to call them the expressive. And then of course there's the S, which is also known as the Amiable. And then there's the C, which is the Analytical. So through studies, they have found that the population of the world will typically, 25% of them will fit into one of these four categories, right? So the good news is that instead of 100 different variations, the vast majority of people are going to fall into one of these four. And sometimes it's very obvious how they fall into these categories. And I will tell you also that this is like going to be a very basic overview, and maybe, we'll do another class down, another 1 hour class of like even going further into it. So I'm going to just give you some really basic knowledge, and just know that you could go in deeper into each of these with conflict resolution and things like that. So there's four main personality profiles, and all of us are going to fall into, one of these. And you typically have a secondary personality profile. So you have a dominant style and then a secondary style. And it kind of is in this quadrant. So we're going to be referring back to the quadrant, and we're going to be talking about these 4 specific personality profiles and how to identify them and what to do with them. So I want to show you guys a quick video because I found this on the internet. I thought it would be really good for you guys to have an image in your mind of who is a D, who is an I, who is a C, and who is an S. And since you and I may not know the same people, I thought this was a great example. Let's look to some famous people. Hopefully you guys can hear online.
When it comes to defending America, it is not enough to merely have an American.
Okay, hold on. I just want to pause this. Listen to how he speaks and look at his body language, okay? Because this is a perfect example of a D.
American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space. So important. Very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the 6th branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement.
You don't try to build a wall. You don't set out to build a wall. You don't say, I'm going to build the biggest, baddest, greatest wall that's ever been built. You don't start there. You say, I'm going to lay this brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid. There will not be one brick on the face of the earth that's going to be laid better than this brick that I'm going to lay in this next 10 minutes. Yeah. And you do that every single day. And soon you have a wall. And soon you have a wall. Yeah. And I think psychologically, the advantage that gives me over a lot of people that I have been in competition with in different situations is it's difficult to take the first step when you look how big the task is. The task is never huge to me. It's always one brick.
Talking of kids, you've got the 3 boys who did all play football. Yeah. But now they've basically all dumped it, and is Harper the only one left?
Okay, hold on, just real quick. This personality profile, I want you to notice the difference between Will Smith, right? So Will had, he had a varying pace and rate in which he spoke. He was statement driven, but not to the point of Donald Trump, right? Which was just like boom, boom, boom. I want you to tell me if you notice how hard this host is working to get something out of him. So far, Beckham's only said yeah and yeah. Just kind of notice how he responds and how much words he uses.
She is the only one left, and she started playing every Sunday. And I mean, she loves it. The boys don't play anymore, which is it's heartbreaking.
No, you out in the garden with the goal.
It's not really, but
they were playing a bit at our shoot.
They were playing a bit,
and they're great. I mean, they're amazing.
Yeah,
they're goofing around with the.
They have a talent, but obviously none of them play anymore. So it's down to Harper.
This isn't a great example, but it is in what
I'm so happy to have you here. This is the first time having you on, so thanks. So I know you were nervous about the entrance. You thought, I think people feel like they're supposed to dance, and so and I was really surprised because I was here earlier today for your rehearsal, and then you abandoned it. But we should at least show them the rehearsal because it was really good.
Shout out to them people.
That's not actually him, if you can't tell.
It was good.
Okay. So here's what I want to just point out real quick on some of those examples. And hopefully you found some comic in that. Bill Gates just said nothing. He went, like he actually used no words in that clip, which was fascinating. And it was a little bit of a spoof because obviously he would never, as an analytical, he would never come out there and dance like that. That would be so far removed from his core personality. David Beckham, did he just like, you just wanted to like hug him. He's just got that smile and, you know, just very like agreeable and, you know, easygoing, right? Will Smith, super, you know, you wanted to like, I'm going to go lay a brick, right? Like, oh my gosh, motivation and influence, you know, completely. With Donald Trump, again, whether you like him or not, it was a perfect case in point of a dominant personality and in his structure of his language, how he used his body, right? Which is very, I mean, that's why comedians love him, or I should say to make fun of him, is because he is every bit of that. So that was just like a little tease for you guys on the personality profiles. Let's dig in a little bit deeper to each one of those. Because again, I'm going to give you like some map of what to look for, and then we'll break it down a little bit more and explain why each of these is important. So the first one we're going to look at is, cue my mouse, there we go, is analytical. So in the video example, that was a Bill Gates, right? Analyticals in terms of like industry and what they do, we're talking lawyer, we're talking engineer, someone who likes the details, someone who is, you know, a software programmer, you know, something along those lines. It's attention to detail. When you're working with an analytical, you want to focus on facts and logic. You want to stay away from emotions and feelings because they care mostly about the bullet points, the facts, the logics, those kind of things. They are slow to make choices, meaning they want the details. They want to know what they're getting into. And so a lot of times they're very cautious and they're slow to decide because they're waiting to make sure that the payoff is clear, right? They have an aversion to risk. So their risk tolerance is very low. They need more details and they need more time. If you go in trying to pressure an analytical to make a decision, they will ghost you because each of these personality profiles, they have a fight or flight mode, right? And for an analytical, it's not fight. It's peace out. I'll see you later. It's flight. You actually have to intervene with an analytical because they will just completely back off and you won't get a response out of them because their natural inclination is, oh, you're trying to pressure me? That's not going to work for me. I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to retreat. So in terms of how they like to work, they tend to like to work alone, right? Because they like the autonomy. They like to be in charge, but it's also because it's what's controllable, right? I can't control someone else in my group and things like that. And that can be uncomfortable and they don't like to be uncomfortable. So that's just a little bit of the analytical. In terms of what they like to wear, gray. You're not going to see them in a loud pattern. Now that's not to say that their wife or their husband didn't dress them or what, you know what I mean? Like this, don't use this as the definitive of if someone's wearing gray, they're an analytical, but you're not going to see them in flashy. It's going to be conservative. It's going to be probably solid and it's going to be a neutral, color because it's got to be functional. It's functional to a T, right? So those are some of the things that you can look for in an analytical. Let's talk about a driver. By the way, a driver's favorite colors are black, white, and red. And they tend to stick to those colors. Again, not to say that you wouldn't see it. My husband is a driver and he loves purple. I think that's more of an emotional attachment though, because purple was the color of one of his favorite basketball teams and different things like that. But color matters, but it's not the end all be all, of our personality. So with a driver, they are the person that takes charge, right? They're a leader. They like a challenge. They're very competitive. They can seem impatient, right? So when you're working with a driver, you want to be focused on the results, okay? Like, I don't want to hear about your weekend. I don't want to know about your pet. Just get to the point efficiently, quickly, use as little words as possible. Get through it right now. Let's go. So they can seem pushy, but they're really just results oriented. With a driver, do not be late. Oh, no. You need to be early. On time is late. Early is on time. So when you're working with a driver, you want to make sure that, if you're, for instance, if you're on a listing appointment with a driver personality, they don't care about how cute you are. They don't care about how fun you are. They just want to know, how are you going to make this process fast, efficient, and can you get the job done? Are you competent? Can you do this? Let's go. Meryl says, dang straight about that on time versus late thing. It's just, I want you to think direct. They're very, very direct. And thank heavens for a lot of drivers in our life, because they tend to get things done, right? So let's talk about the Amiable. Okay, the Amiable is, they are fantastic listeners. They love to help and support. They don't want to be typically in the front and center limelight, but they love to stand next to the person that is and know that, hey, like, Christy is only who she is because Kelsey stands by her side. Legitimately all the time. And we'll talk about an expressive here in a minute, but whereas a driver tends to like to be that center of attention and enters a room with impact, an Amiable, no, right? They're there to just make sure everything is smooth. Oh, that elevator's full. You know what? I'll take the stairs. No problem, guys. I'll get that. What can I help with? How can I smooth things over? They are a great harmonizer in a group, in a crowd. And that's, that's good. So they are big on communication and trust and people. So one thing I want to point out right now, and we're going to talk more about this, an analytical and a driver, and you can see my arrows going up, they are task directed, meaning they care more about the task at hand than the people. And it's not because they're cruel or insensitive, but you've got to remember, an analytical is focused on the details and the task at hand and the process and the procedure. Those are their words: process, procedure, task, structure. A driver is like, is this efficient? Are we getting it done? Don't waste my time. Is this meeting over? If the meeting goes over, that's unacceptable. Let's move. What's next, right? Now we're shifting gears below that line, and we're shifting to people directed. So an Amiable is highly focused on team building and making sure that there's that office harmony or that group dynamic. They know that great results come through people. And so that's when I say it's a support role. They're great listeners. And they just really also seek security. So interesting enough, you're going to start to see this grid that we're building. Amiables tend to make decisions slower as well, because one of the most important things to them is stable. I want a stable environment. I want a stable income. I want a stable, I just want security. I don't want a lot of change. I don't want a lot of risk. I need security and stable. So on the left side of our grid, you can see Analyticals make decisions a little bit slower. Amiables make decisions a little bit slower, but for different reasons. An Analytical needs more details. An Amiable needs to make sure that this is going to work out and I'm not going to have a lot of change and I've got the right people in place to support me and help me, or I am the right person, right? It's more of that team dynamic. I want to answer a couple questions here real quick. So can people change over time? You know what? That is such a fantastic question. And the answer is yes. So you're never going to change who you are as a core person. And we do carry more than one of these. You're going to typically have, like Meryl is a driver analytical, right? And so if you're looking at my grid, and I'll use my husband because I don't need his permission to talk about him. Just kidding, honey, I love you. But he is a driver analytical. And so you do have two parts of you. You are not one dimensional, right? But one thing that Meryl will never be and is an amiable. He's never going to cross that grid. He can work with, and this is going to be expressive, what we're going to talk about. He can work really well with an analytical. He can work really well with other drivers. He can work really well with the expressives. But you're never going to go across the grid in terms of your personality. So a lot of times what I see is if people are going across the grid with personality, and I'll just put up our expressive here so that we've got a complete thing, and we'll go back and talk about expressives. They're not taking the quiz right. They're answering it how they want to answer it and not true. And so one thing I do recommend is there's a secondary quiz. I'll have to get the link for you that you give to people in your personal life and in your business life. And then they say, oh yeah, that's you, right? Because you can get confusion. So people also change under stress, okay? So people also change under stress. And that's where, for instance, when a driver sometimes is under stress, they can revert to an analytical, and they'll say, okay, hold on, let's get the details, right? Because they're not going to go into emotion. They're going to go into details, facts, and figures. An analytical can revert back to an amiable under stress, right? So we all have a primary personality profile. We have a secondary personality profile, and then we change under stress. So I'll use myself as an example. I am an expressive. So let's talk about expressives. They're motivation, excitement, inspiration, persuasive. They're outgoing. They're like I meet people everywhere I go. I love talking to people. I do. I love talking to people. I meet people, and I like making friends. I'm a people, right? I make decisions quickly. Do not bog me down with too many details, right? They can fear being ignored, right? So what I was talking about is I'm an expressive. I'm also a high driver, and I'm also a high amiable. When I go into a room, if there are 3 other drivers in the room, I don't need to be a driver. I just be fun. I get to have fun, right? But if I go into a room, and this is funny because in my family setting, we don't have any drivers. I am the driver. And it drives my husband crazy because in our relationship, he's such a driver. I'm like, oh yeah, just take care of that. We go on vacation. I make him plan everything. He's like, well, just imagine I wasn't here. And I'd be like, well, yeah, then I'd have to plan everything. So in my family dynamic, there with the lack of a driver, my D takes over. I boss everybody around. My mom, my sister, my aunt, everybody. Like Christy's in charge. She's going to get it done. Because that's my secondary personality profile. So your personality profiles can change, but it also depends on who you're with and in the stress, right? So again, I'm primarily an expressive. With the lack of a driver, my D kicks in and I just take control. Under stress, my D kicks in. Like if something's not getting done, then I kind of just come in and take over. In a different stressful environment, if there is a D and I can see that they're railroading the rest of the team, my S kicks in, my mother bear kicks in, and I want to protect everybody. So your core is not going to change, but how you act under stress and pressure can change. And that secondary one can change, but you're never going to go across. Like an analytical is not going to all of a sudden give up all of their spreadsheets for hugs. It's just not going to happen. It won't happen. An expressive is not going to all of a sudden care less about people and just say, go straight into spreadsheets. Like those are. And so for the other dynamic, the driver and the amiable, an amiable, it would be against their core nature to go in and just dominate. And like, when I say dominate, to go into a room and just like take control, take charge. It would be so uncomfortable. It would never happen. It might happen in a small meeting for a specific purpose, but it's not who they are at their core. Now, they can get more detailed and they can get more friendly, but they're never going to go in and just be that driver personality. So in terms of working across the grid, you can move up and down very easy, and across, like you can flex really easy in those. You've got to focus. Like, your big takeaway from today is, okay, if I'm an expressive, I need to make sure I know how to communicate with an analytical. And it is my hardest one. I have to really focus because I'm like, let's estimate. Analyticals do not estimate. In fact, they don't, that's not even a word they'll use. They want exactness, right? So I think I answered that question. And then Merrill said, I think they can, as the years have gone, I've gotten more analytical. He has, but I don't think it's likely that someone, okay, so he agrees. So your natural style, your core style is going to stay the same, but you can kind of maneuver around. And if you haven't figured out, and I've already told you, I am an expressive. So here's a quick, easy grid to help you see like where you're going to have some commonalities and where you're going to have to work. So again, let's start with analyticals. So an analytical has a commonality with the amiable in that it's ask directed, meaning they're going to ask more questions. So asking questions, getting more details, kind of slowing down that process. If you are an analytical and you can tell that the person that you're working with is an amiable, lean into that, right? That's a commonality. That's how you build rapport, and you'll be able to get further, right? That whole catch more flies with sugar or with vinegar, whatever that saying is. I don't know, but you get what I'm saying. I'm not an analytical. I don't have the exact quote, and I don't care. That's how you know I'm expressive. So what an analytical can do with the driver, though, is they are more task directed. So they'll be able to find commonalities on process, system, and structure, where an analytical will drive a wedge with their relationship with a driver is if they try to give too much detail. The driver just wants the bullet points, but they're both task directed. So if you go into a meeting with both of them, they expect the meeting to start on time, end on time, and to have a clear purpose. There's not going to be small talk, right? It's going to be a very succinct meeting with very few emotions and feelings. Now, where an analytical needs to work and be aware of is with their expressive. The expressives are going to drive them nuts. Here's a good example. An analytical will schedule out things in advance. An expressive will say, wait, let's just go to lunch. Whoa, 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 whoa. We can't just go to lunch. Where would we go? What time are we going? Do we have a reservation? How much is it going to cost? I mean, no, that is like, you do not spring something on an analytical. And expressive, they're always like, yeah, I know we said we were going to go here. How about we go over there? That will drive an analytical absolutely insane, right? So an analytical needs to say, okay, I'm dealing with my super expressive friend. I need to be a little bit flexible. She's probably going to spring something on me. And an expressive, let's look at the expressive. I need to know with my analytical friends that I can't just change things, right? Oh, I've got a great idea. No. That is not on the agenda, right? Like, I can't do that. I have to tone myself down, if you will. So let's talk about expressives since we're crossing that. When I'm working with a driver, you know what a driver wants to tell an expressive? I've actually had them tell me this. Shut up. Christy, stop talking. That's what they really want to tell you, because the expressive is just like, and they're just, oh my gosh, shut up. The analytical and the driver will tell an expressive, like, just enough, right? Now, my amiable friends, they're happy to let me talk for hours and hours and hours. And they'll listen to everything, right? Everything. Oh, Merrill typed it too slow. He said, shut up. That's hilarious. So with the driver, We know who they work well with. They're going to go into the detail with the analytical. They're going to be a leader with the expressive. Now, where they struggle is with the amiable, right? The amiable, I have to put this up there. Meryl said I talk too much in the morning. I just jump out of bed and start talking. It drives him nuts. He takes some time to warm up. So with the driver and the amiable, what this typically looks like, guys, is the amiable wants to support, but they're very concerned about the harmony of the group. They're concerned about the dynamics and feelings. So in the meeting, if the driver is just like laying into somebody, the amiable is super concerned about what's happening there. And they take that on personally. A driver has no idea that amiable is uncomfortable. They like literally don't even know. And so for an amiable, that usually is retreat, right? So remember, there's fight or flight. An expressive and a driver, they're fight. And expressive is going to be like, oh, no, you didn't. I'm going to defend myself. Here we go. A driver's going to be like, they'll go into even more control, right? So they don't like the counter offer. They get on the, you get a counter offer from a driver and I call you and they're going to say, Christy, here's what we're going to do. I don't like this at all. We're going to say this, this, and this, and then you're going to tell them that. That's what they talk to their agent, right? And so, and the turn, I'm going to say, you know what? You're absolutely correct. And let's discuss our other options. Like I'm going to meet that pace right away with them. So a driver can railroad amiables and they need to be aware. So we call that empathy, right? We call that emotional intelligence. They need to be aware that if they didn't take time to ask them how their weekend was, because that's not normal for a driver. A driver's not going to do some small talk. They're going to want to get right to business. And amiable and expressive, we take people before business, right? We're more people directed. So I think the last one was amiable and driver. So an amiable, they are such a great, they just mold well. Right? They can work really well with the analyticals. They have the patience to work with those analyticals that are too detail oriented for someone like myself. They work really great with the expressives. They can tone us down. They can help us focus, right? And for a driver, they need to be able to stand up for themselves. That's kind of the big thing. They need to say, okay, this person, I'm not going to take it personal. Right? So sometimes an amiable, when they're working with a driver, they'll have to say, okay, they weren't trying to hurt my feelings by not asking me how my weekend was. It was just that they were trying to get right on task. And that's I'm giving a very general, right? But let's take, for instance, let's say that, you got married over the weekend. Here's a great example. You got married over the weekend. It's this big thing. Don't be surprised if the driver doesn't say, hey, how was the wedding? And just says, okay, guys, here's what's on the agenda today. So an amiable, that might hurt their feelings and be like, I can't believe they didn't say anything about that. And the driver's just oblivious to that kind of stuff. And a good driver will take time to have a moment of human connection before moving right into that stuff. So again, an amiable might say, I know that my boss is not a total jerk, right? It's just, not part of his personality profile. And so at that point, the amiable can say, hey, by the way, how was that for you? Mine was great too, right? It kind of gives that opportunity. And I do have a high amiable, and I do have a high driver, and I do have a high expressive. I think my awareness of analytical is so high because it is probably the one that I have to adjust the most, and it irritates me. So, okay, keep moving on. So let's play a little game. And I'm going to give you guys some characteristics, and you guys are going to guess of the 4 personality profiles who we're talking about. So in terms of body language, this personality profile can tend to lean back, maybe not like lean in. You're going to have limited facial expression. You're not going to have big body language in terms of moving that. Their speech is going to be deliberate and concise, few words. You're going to have a lot of questions. They're going to inquire a lot, asking questions, wanting details. It's formal in terms of how they show up. It's not like lackadaisical. It's not all friendly. It's formal. And they're going to be focused on the details. They're going to be methodical. They're going to be very thorough, and they like lists and procedures. So I've got a couple people came in. So Meryl says C. Another person said D. Another one said C. What about here in the room? What do you guys think? Are we talking about a C, or also known as an analytical? Yes, you guys are correct. So again, broad strokes. And then you kind of get to know people a little bit through conversation, things like that. So when you're working with an analytical, there's a couple things that, whether you are an analytical and you need to be aware of this, or you're working with an analytical and you want to prepare in advance, right? You do not want to spring something on an analytical. That's going to make them uncomfortable and they're going to retreat, right? When you're working with a seller or a buyer, how do we prepare them for the process, right? Show them the contract in advance. That's one of the most perfect things that you can do when you're working with an analytical. Show them the contract in advance and go over it with them. What else do you think you could do when to not spring something on? How do you prepare an analytical for selling or buying? You can type it in or comment.
Give them all the resources you have.
Okay. Kelsey says, give them the resources in advance. Absolutely. Yep. So you cannot give them too much information. A net sheet's a great tool to use with an analytical. You cannot give them too much information. They're going to ask you, I would never in a million years ask to see a plat map, or do you have the floor plan with the exact measurements? Oh my gosh, it's 4 bedrooms. Get over it. That is the difference between that. So you want to do, blueprints of the house, a loan estimate, right? Meryl says, get your abacus out. You absolutely cannot give them too much information. So when you go to that listing presentation, you need to make sure that you have your graphs in place. Your CMA has everything in there, and they know how you got the numbers, and you give it to them physically, right? If you're there with them, give it to them physically, email it to them in advance. Don't spring it on them. Now, when you're under contract with them, that means you also are, here's what happens next. Steps 1, 2, and 3. Here's what happens next. So that's how you stay in good communication, right? So prepare them for the unknown. We are going to do a home inspection. There are going to be things wrong with the home. Okay? Just know that. Prepare in advance. There's going to be things. How we respond is one of 4 ways. Boom, 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 right? And you've got to give them, here's what happens next. And in written format to back it up is even better, right? We don't estimate. We don't talk about feelings. We talk about task at hand and how we're going to get it done. So of course, I think it goes without saying, don't be vague in your communication with them. Have clear, concise communication. Don't gloss over the details because they're not going to like that. Some of the really great positive things about analyticals is they really solve problems and they get things done. And they are not without emotion. They absolutely have emotion. You just have to make sure that it's in an appropriate fashion, right? Again, if there's a task that needs to be done, they're less about the emotion and more about the other. So the next one is going to be intense. I like that word, intense, serious, deliberate, statement pieces, command pieces. They could speak quickly and loudly and boldly. They're going to be very businesslike. Sometimes they work independently. They're going to work in priority order to get things done. Who are we talking about? Yeah, the driver. We're talking about the driver. Yep, the online poll says driver, and you are correct. So do not ramble with a driver. I I cannot stress that enough. Do not ramble and go on and on and on with a driver. You want to be direct in your communication. Be specific, right? So if you are an expressive or you're an amiable or an analytical, you're probably going to have to pare down what you're going to bring into that meeting, right? To make sure that it is, that it's important. Merrill says, don't have long meetings. In fact, if you end a meeting on early with a driver, that's a bonus for them because they're about efficiency. Like, let's get this done as quickly as possible. I don't want to waste time. I got something to do and I'm moving forward, right? So you want to ask specific what questions with them. What needs to be done? What are you going to do? In fact, if you say you're going to do something with a driver, make sure you follow up and do it because that will hurt your credibility with them if you don't. I mean, that should go without saying, right? We should always do what we say we're going to do. But I think it's really important for you to understand that. Now, for a driver, make sure that you do recognize when someone's trying to communicate with you about their feelings. Like you gotta kind of be on that. So misconceptions about a driver is that that they're just they don't care about people. They just want to get things done. That they're really bossy and they always take control. Drivers are great for getting to the point and getting things done. They're action oriented. So they just need to be aware that if they feel threatened, a driver is one of the personality profiles that goes even more into their own personality profile. So a driver, in fight and flight, they are fight and they can just go in even deeper. So, and you can't use feelings to get them out of that. You have to use logic, right? And structure. So those are some of the things to be aware of. The next one is basically we're going to talk about someone who has a lot of gestures, who's kind of bold, probably wears a lot of different prints, probably wears bright colors, talks loud, fast, distracted. Here's a great one. If you go into this personality profile's office and you look at their desk, it's going to have like novelty items. They're going to have like 4 different highlighters, 3 pens. They're going to have Post-its and they're going to have, you're going to see their personality in their surroundings. Like it's going to be very obvious who they are. In a meeting, they're energetic. They can sometimes seem too informal. They can come on a little strong, like sometimes like, oh, that person's just too much for me, right? And so, those are just some of the things to be aware of. Yeah, everybody says, coming in hot is the expressive. So some of the things to realize about an expressive is that they're a great, like the amiable, they're a great harmonizer and motivator to bring the team together. So they tend to, bring out ideas from other people because they're not afraid to ask those why questions about who do we have? How can we make this work? They are people directed. So they're going to look to the team. Yeah, Conrad, you're an expressive. Welcome to the club, bud. That's why I like you so much. So, they're the golden retriever, as a lot of people say. Like everybody loves them, right? Now, some of the downside is that they can lack attention to detail, right? They can leave a meeting without a clear, like, here's what we're doing next, right? That's where that driver and that analytical comes in and says, okay, this was a great meeting. What are we doing? What's next? An expressive could just get caught up in the moment and ideas and ideas and ideas and ideas and ideas. They're like a continual brain dump, if you will, right? It's just this never ending flow of ideas and energy. So you got to be, if you're in a meeting with an expressive, you want to hear them out and you want to pin them down. You got to pin them down and help them get that focus. So don't be cold and impersonal. Don't cut off that communication. That's going to lead to a situation where they're just going to feel like you're too curt, and it's very uncomfortable for them. So they can also, easily be defended or offended if they feel like someone doesn't care about them, right? So those are just some of the things to think about. Don't be vague. You gotta pin them down. So this one should be pretty obvious who we're talking about next. They're definitely people directed. Feelings are involved. They're a little bit more reserved. So they're going to have a softer tone, a more quiet tone. They're going to make great eye contact. They just feel good to be around. So I want you to think warm and friendly, very cooperative, more kind of go with the flow. On their desk, you're going to see some personal items that are sentimental in a memento, right? Like it's going to have a purpose. It's not just going to be LED lights behind their whiteboard because they think it's cool. That's me. I'm the one with 4 highlighters. And sometimes they can be vague in their communication style, mainly because they're avoiding conflict. So the verdict is out. If we don't know how this is going, I'm gonna kind of just stay where I'm at because I don't want a lot of change and I don't want conflict. I'm that harmonizer. So with an amiable, for everybody working with an amiable, you need to make sure that you're taking notice. It's totally fine. You're taking notice if they're retreating, because an amiable they're not a fighter, they're a flight, right? They're going to flee, they're going to retreat, but it looks like acquiescence, right? Like they're going to kind of go into themselves, right? And they could be railroaded and they might not speak up for themselves. So if you're an amiable, you have to practice boundaries, you have to practice expressing what is important to you. Where do you want to eat? Right? It could be as simple as that. And I think I already said it. You guys, I saw a bunch of people said S. Yes, it's S, right? It is the amiable. So you've got to be aware when working with an amiable to be more people directed than task directed. You also want to make sure you set clear guidelines of what's expected and when things are due, because they also want to prepare. Like the analytical, they don't want to come unprepared. That's uncomfortable for them. They don't like that. So you don't want to spring too much on them. They're very easygoing, but at the same time, respect is a big one, right? Respecting who they are and hearing them out, even though they might not be the one that's like, hey, I really want to tell you something. So you have to leave space for that human interaction, if that makes sense, right? Which can be hard for an analytical and for a driver. For a driver, it's hard because there's no time in the agenda to talk about feelings. For an analytical, if it's not on the agenda, like we're just going to move forward, right? So with the expressive and the amiables, you have to leave space to have that human interaction. Amiables can also tend to over worry along with analyticals. Sometimes we call that analysis paralysis, where they'll just kind of get, caught up in. So Pamela, we have all 4 of them inside of us. So Pamela says, I'm all 4. We all have them inside of us. Because remember, we've got our dominant personality trait and a secondary trait, but then we also have how we respond under stress and pressure. So we all have them, all 4 of them in us. And you'll typically, I should have grabbed even mine to give you guys an example of what this looks like in the assessment, but you'll see them ranked like between 0 and 100%. It's rare to not have any of this in you, Now Merrill, he's got like, his D is probably, it's over 90%. I know that. And then his I is mid-level. His S is like 10%. And his C is, I want to say, in the 70s, right? So we have all 4 of them in us. It's just how they come out. And we absolutely do adapt to our situation. So I think we adapt to our situation when it comes to my children. I am all D. Absolutely. And that makes sense, right? So being a D with our children, that makes total sense because of the role that we play, right? So just to give you a quick, this ask directed, tell directed is very important piece when you're working with these personalities. So remember, ask directed is going to be your analytical and your amiable. So they're not going to interrupt others, right? They're not going to try to take control of a situation. They're going to ask a lot of questions. They're going to move slower, right? The tell directed is they're going to interrupt if, right? Like if they have something to say, they're going to use big voices and they're going to make, a lot of, you're going to notice them in a meeting. Okay. So think who goes unnoticed in a meeting? It's the amiable, perhaps the analytical. Who takes control of the meeting and everybody knows that they're there? It's the driver and the expressive. So what this looks on your, so what that looks on there, let's look at this map. Task directed. So above that grid is your analytical driver. The task is the end, the means to the end. Get things done. On the bottom is our amiable and expressive. We use people to get things done. So that's one of those fundamental differences between the top and the bottom. The task is more important than the people and how we get there on top. On bottom, people help us get where we need to get things done. And that's where that focus is going to be. To the left, remember, we have our ask directed, asking questions, kind of taking a back seat and moving a little bit slower in our decision-making process. And on the right, it's going to be forceful. It's going to be big impact. I'm going to tell you what to do. Here we go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Right. And so when you're working with those people, you have to remember some of those characteristics. All of this is just going to be cues for you guys, right? You're going to be looking at body language. You're going to look at the words people use, right? The moment someone says, can you send me, if you walk up to a home with a buyer and the buyer says, how many shingles are on that roof? Yeah, I know who that, if they go, oh, look at the plants. They're so good. Oh, the curb appeal on this property is amazing. Well, there's your, I wonder what kind of neighborhood this is for my kids. If my kids are going to have are going to be able to make friends here, right? Social impact type thing, right? Like it's very, a driver, how much is this home? Right? You can start to see these people come out in both buyers and sellers. So the whole point of this class, as I sum up in 2 minutes, because I am not short on words, as we summarize, the whole point of this is it's our job to be versatile. So we need to look at that grid, and I suggest you print it off and start practicing. Figure out what your spouse is, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, figure out your son, figure out your neighbor, try to figure out what kind of personality profile are they? And then you can even ask questions, right? What's most important for you in this process? Listen to what they say. You should be able to figure out who they are and what's important to them. So the versatile part is we have to change. Now, I'm never going to change my core personality, but I'm going to use myself as an example. When I go into a listing presentation or when I'm working with a buyer that's analytical, I have to step up my game on attention to detail, right? I can't gloss over facts. I can't estimate. I have to make sure, did I send them everything? Do they know what's happening next, right? And the same thing, when an analytical works with me, I don't care about all of that. Just tell me what to do. Where do I sign? I mean, guys, when I bought my house, I'm the type of person, because you guys have all had a client like this. You've got the client that reads every single page of the contract and then calls you and asks you 17 questions about the contract. Then you have the person that's like, click, 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 click. That's me, right? I just give me enough details so I can make a decision and let's go. That's the adjustment, adjusting how you communicate so that you can make the other person feel comfortable. It helps in conflict resolution, and it just, think about people in your life. If you can really figure out who they are. So if someone wants the exact property tax and the state tax and the city tax, they're an analytical. you cannot over inform them. They like that stuff, and that's how they know that you are doing a great job, and they're going to be super happy with you, right? So that's the point of this, is just being aware so that you can adjust how you communicate and your style to make them feel more comfortable so you can get more things done. One of my favorite books is called The Speed of Trust, written by, I think it's Stephen R. Covey. And he talks about when you have trust, it's actually an economic value. As soon as you build trust, the time to get things done goes down and the cost goes down. So you can get to trust, speed and cost go down. Without trust, the speed slows, right? So you get things, it takes much longer to get things done and the cost goes up. So focus on getting to trust. How you get to trust is by being versatile. So remember, there is the 4 personality profiles, and your job is to just be aware of what other people are. And should I adjust? The answer is yes, you should adjust so that you can make it more comfortable for them. So in the resources, guys, don't forget to join. If you haven't joined our Resilient Realtor Facebook page, please join, because this is where we're sharing information. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, also let us know, because we're preparing classes. We've got 8 weeks of classes, but we're always willing to do some. Next week, it's going to be about dialing for dollars. The week after that, I don't remember. Oh, geographic farming. And then I'm really excited. We're going to be covering everything Google My Business. So please check in the events section of Resilient Realtor so that you can learn what classes we've got coming up. I try to make a mixture of prospecting, lead generation type classes with some behind the scenes, either skill building like this class or business building like the Google My Business class that we're going to be putting up together. So make sure you guys are tuned into all of that. And then in terms of the resources, I've just got a simple graph for you guys. But if you have questions about this, let me know. I'm always happy to have a communication. You can message me on Facebook, Instagram, whatever works best for you. Most importantly, be aware. The challenge from this class, go out and figure out who your spouse is, who the person you're dating is, who your oldest child is. Find out what their personality profile is, and then look and see what can you do to adjust and be flexible in how you communicate with them. Thank you guys so much for coming to the class. I appreciate it. Have a phenomenal weekend and go sell some homes. If you didn't know,